Welcome to talkSPORT's End Zone Rundown. We are honored to have back on this program. We had him last year, and it went really well. He is one of the draft experts in the world. Few people, if anybody, knows the NFL Draft better than Matt Miller from ESPN. You can follow him at NFL Draft Scout. How's it going, Matt?
Doing very well. Appreciate you having me back on. It's an honor.
Thank you very much. So, look, we're through the combine now. We're early into beginning to kind of get close to the pro days, but all the mocks, the initial ones are set, and there's going to be movement, and quarterbacks are going to rise. That's how it goes. But you have a pretty good feel now, I'm sure, for where you think the top names, where they at least rank. The guy that I feel like we've been talking about for years now is Shedeur Sanders, obviously from Colorado. So much talent. Some people have concerns. You have the Deion Sanders factor. Somebody's going to draft this kid, and somebody might turn their team over to him, and he could be playing in the NFL for the next 15 years. What is your scouting report? What is your read on him in terms of concerns, potential? What do you believe in Shedeur Sanders as an NFL prospect?
Yeah, well, I think you have to start with the fact that he was a 4-year starter, 2 years at Jackson State, 2 years at Colorado. He elevated each program, which is something that you like to see when a quarterback can come in and make those teams better and do it almost immediately. To build Jackson State, to build Colorado back, it was certainly impressive. He's incredibly tough. I mean, he will stand in the pocket and take hits that a lot of other quarterbacks simply fold when they're hit as hard as he is. But he has that, I think, the love of the game. He has a bit of a chip on his shoulder. You know, you mentioned it. It's impossible to separate him from who his dad is. And I think living in that shadow has given him a chip on his shoulder where he wants to prove that he's his own guy, that he's his own player. He's making his own name for himself. He's incredibly accurate. He's not the most strong armed quarterback. He's not the most mobile quarterback, but he is incredibly accurate. And he's able to, with good field vision, find his guys. He's able to fire off, bullets to get the ball where it needs to be. I think the biggest concerns are size. He's 6'1". He put on weight for the combine. He got up to 212 pounds. He's closer to 200, 205 pounds is what he played at. Again, he doesn't have the biggest arm. He doesn't have the greatest mobility. What he does is he kind of carves you up from the pocket with touch and timing. Now, as far as like over here in the States, there's been a lot of concerns about his personality.
Yeah.
Every team I've talked to so far has liked his personality. It's this tough line to walk between wanting your quarterback to be confident but not cocky. And I think he's 22 years old. He's very confident. It's in his DNA to be confident, right? I've not heard anyone say that they had a bad interview with him or that he, gave them a negative perception during their 15 minutes that teams get to spend with these guys. These aren't day-long interviews at this part of the process. They're 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I would caution everyone. We all remember going on our first date with our spouses, right? Yeah, the first 15 minutes are important. You can get an impression, but they didn't tell you the whole story about them, right? You needed a lot more time to figure out what made them tick and who they are. It's the same with these NFL draft interviews. So we try not to get too carried away about how the first 15 minutes go.
There's a team that I look at right now, and obviously they just acquired Geno Smith for Pete Carroll with that Seattle Seahawks reunion. But I've always thought like the Las Vegas Raiders with Tom Brady, the Raiders, they need a quarterback for the future, somebody with swagger and that could play well in Vegas. Would Shedeur Sanders, would he potentially be a fit there?
That's where I thought he was going before Saturday when the trades happened. That was why I kind of penciled him in at like, okay, well, if he doesn't go 1 or 2 or 3, he'll go 6. Now, and as we're recording, even the NFL is changing every minute. It feels like with a new trade. I have my Adam Schefter notifications on so I can keep up with everything. But it does get harder to find that landing spot for Shedeur just because this musical chairs at the quarterback position, you're kind of waiting to see who's going to be left standing. And it might be him. We see this happen sometimes where teams need to win now. So they go after Justin Fields and they go after Aaron Rodgers. And some of those teams might be a destination for Shedeur, much like Michael Penix was last year, where the Falcons get Kirk Cousins from the Vikings and we think, okay, we cross them off the quarterback list. And then they draft someone at 8 overall, and now Michael Penix Jr. will be the starter in Atlanta. So I think with Shedeur Sanders, it's going to be a similar situation where, if if the Giants get Aaron Rodgers, could they still draft Shedeur Sanders? Maybe not at 3, maybe they
Yeah.
would trade back, but I'm looking at a lot of teams that are in a similar situation of, even if it feels like you've crossed off that need at quarterback, is it still a spot where you would want to be willing to add a young guy? And there's going to be multiple teams. The Jets at 7, the Saints at 9. If you get into the teens, is where his night could get long, because the teams in the teens are a lot of those, like, they're on the edge. They're kind of a fringe building team. Or you have teams that, like San Francisco, took a shocking step back last year that wouldn't draft a quarterback. So if he makes it past 9, then I think you look at, let's see what Pittsburgh does at 21. Let's see what the Rams do at 26. But that's where you could maybe see a bit of a fall for him.
Very interesting. All right, let's get one more Colorado player out of the way. The other player that everyone is talking about, Travis Hunter, who wants to play 100% of cornerback and wide receiver. I don't know if that's humanly impossible. I love that he wants to do it, though. This day and age where so many guys, they're not going to play in bowl games. They're going to specialize and only play one sport. Travis Hunter will do everything. What is your read on Travis Hunter? Is there any shot that he could still be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft?
I think it's still very much in play, just because we don't know exactly what Tennessee's going to do, or if they're even going to keep that pick at this point in time. He is, I've never seen anyone like him. And I've been covering this sport for 15 years professionally, and watching it my entire life. I've never seen anyone like him. Even going back to guys like Charles Woodson, Adoree Jackson, there were linebackers like Miles Jack, who played a little bit of running back as well. I mean, it's unprecedented for someone to play as much as he has on both sides of the ball. He said at the combine he wants to do both in the NFL. I am I'm excited to see him try. I don't think it's possible. I'm with you. I think the amount of time that it takes to
Yeah.
be great at one position, now we're going to double that. And I would worry. I think we've seen this with some guys on defense in the NFL, where they come in and too much is given to them. Minka Fitzpatrick is a good example. Isaiah Simmons is another. Guys who were first round picks, and they were drafted to be chess pieces, and then too much was put on their plate, and they ended up having to be moved to a new team and see their roles change. I would worry the same thing. If you put too much on his plate early, does he fizzle out because he's not able to first establish himself at one position? He has a great mentor in Deion Sanders, who did a little bit of this in the NFL. But for old people like me, will remember Deion didn't really play a whole lot of receiver until
Right.
1995. He'd been in the league quite some time before he went to the Cowboys and was their number 2 receiver opposite Michael Irvin. But that was the year in which he played the most wide receiver. So it wasn't a situation where right out of college, hey, welcome to the NFL, you're going to have to do double the meetings that everyone else does. That's just, it's not really practical. Now, he's a 4.0 student. He apparently, all he does is play football and go fishing. So he has he has the free time, I think, to attempt this. But I don't know that any young player could take on that type of role and responsibility.
It's a great point, and be a Pro Bowler and all pro at both. But yeah, if he does it,
Yeah.
he's a Shohei Ohtani of the NFL.
Right.
So when and I think probably everyone in the world, follows you on social media that follows us. And I've seen you talk a lot about how out of all the different positions in this draft, running back is strong. And we saw last year with Saquon Barkley in the Super Bowl, the importance again of the running back position. But you talk about someone like Ashton Yancey from Boise State. There's a couple other names that could actually go in the first round. What are we seeing in this resurgence of running backs in this passing quarterback dominated era? And where do you think could be a good landing spot? Whether also, speaking of the Raiders and Pete Carroll,
Right.
they'll need a running back. Where do you think you could see Ashton go in the NFL draft in the first round?
Yeah, running back is back, and I think it's importantly back for teams that have the quarterback position settled. And we saw that, like, to your point, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. They go to teams with starting quarterbacks who are good starting quarterbacks, and they were able to supplement those offenses really, really well. Saquon, I was famously, with nearly a record-setting season. That's great news for guys like Ashton Jeanty, who could come off the board as early as 6 now that the Raiders have Geno Smith. We saw last year the Raiders, and I know it was a different regime, but they went best player available with Brock Bowers. He had a great rookie season, a record-setting rookie season. Well, I think we could see something similar with Ashton Jeanty if he's on the board. The Bears felt like a lock for him at number 10 overall until Geno Smith went to the Raiders, which is, I think, like as you know, it's what makes covering the NFL so fun because one move happens and it alters the
Yeah.
trajectory of so many different things. So 6 is a spot, 10 is certainly a spot. I think Cowboys fans for a long time were conflicted because they have the number 12 pick and they thought, well, if he makes it, do we want to spend the first round pick on a running back? I don't think they're going to have to worry about it. I think he's going to be gone by then. But you mentioned other names. Omarion Hampton from North Carolina,
Yeah.
I do think gets into the first round. And then I think maybe one of the Ohio State guys. They had two, which was why they won a national championship. Quinshon Judkins, who is more of a power back, and then Travion Henderson, who is a great receiver out of the backfield, a great blocker in the passing game. A lot of teams are looking at what the Detroit Lions did with David Montgomery and Jameer Gibbs
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
understanding that having that lightning and thunder, or Knuckles and Sonic, as they prefer to be called, having that duo makes your offense just so potent and powerful. Especially in a time where teams are putting 5 and 6 defensive backs on the field
Yeah.
70% of the time. And it has been fun to watch the cycle start to spin of, well, if your linebackers are going to weigh 215 pounds, I'm going to put my 225-pound running back and we're just going
Yeah.
to run over you. And Derrick Henry's been doing it for 10 years and no one else had really caught on, but it does feel like teams are starting to try to combat the smaller, faster defenses with more of a power game.
So we talked a lot already about the top of the draft, but a team that at talksport.com, they're still our main team, even with the Super Bowl loss. The Kansas City Chiefs, obviously with Mahomes and Kelsey coming back for another year, they're not drafting until the bottom of the first round. But when you look at the offensive line, which had issues obviously all season, when you look at the
Yeah.
wide receiver position, which they invested in was Xavier Worthy, but still, could potentially upgrade. It's hard to predict the bottom of the first round. That might be the hardest thing to do. But is there a position or a player that you think would be an ideal fit for the Kansas City Chiefs as they try to get back to the Super Bowl and actually take the next step this year?
I think anything but quarterback should be on the table for them because it is wild how many needs that team had versus how many games they won. Because you mentioned it, another wide receiver, even after they signed Hollywood Brown to the 1 year deal, offensive line, yeah, almost any position, and we'll see as free agency kicks off what they do at the left tackle position. I'm convicted that they have to get that figured out before the draft because they might be starting a rookie or first year starter at least at left guard. Running back Isaiah Pacheco seemed to really lose a step after injury
Yep.
last year. Tight into the future could be in play for them, and then on defense, it's defensive tackle next to Chris Jones. They need a defensive end opposite Karlaftis. They re-signed Nick Bolton. So linebacker, you feel like it's okay, but corner and safety were kind of weak spots last year. So they could go, my gosh, numerous directions. I'm going to assume that they have the offensive line figured out by the time we actually get to the draft. And
Mhm.
I think going to the defensive line would be huge for them. It's a position
Mm.
that I mean, Karlaftis was the first round pick. Early in Brett Veach's career as general manager, he spent back-to-back second-round picks on defensive linemen who never really got onto the field. And so that is a position where I think they would now like the opportunity to fix that. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss would be
Mhm.
so much fun next to Chris Jones to have that speed. I think Derek Harmon from Oregon would be another fit at both defensive tackles who would be really good players for what Kansas City wants to do defensively. This is a very strong defensive end class. Unfortunately, we might see a run on those guys
Yeah.
early. If somehow Mike Green from Marshall is there,
Mm.
certainly having that speed off the edge would be really, really important for them.
Well, all right, we'll get one more in for Matt Miller because he is very, very busy and he's been very grateful to help us out with everything at talksport.com. You can obviously follow him on Twitter at NFL Draft Scout. The guy who could go number one, who I personally I'm not sure what to think of, is Cam Ward, who has an incredible story to basically to bounce around college. Incarnate Word, Washington State, goes to Miami, has a huge arm, can be a gunslinger, can make plays, but also can you know, extend plays too much, which really can hurt you in the NFL. Matt, what is your read on Cam Ward, and would he be the number one pick in any other draft, or are teams so QB desperate now that they're going to overdraft Cam Ward?
I think looking at it historically, we would have to, I mean, maybe 2022 when Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback would be the only other time
Kenny
in
Kenny
recent,
Pickett, number one.
right? And the only time in recent history where I think he would be the QB1 in that draft. Yeah, he's tough to evaluate. I think the positives are like Shedeur, he elevated 3 different programs. He did get better every year in college. But like you said, he has to play faster. He's going to have to learn to speed up his process. We saw that with Caleb Williams this past year. Like some of that, let me stand around and wait and I'll just throw it to my guy when he gets open. That doesn't work in the NFL. You have to be able to play on time. He certainly has the athletic ability. He has the arm strength. I love the playmaker mentality, but it has to get dialed in, has to get reined in a little bit. I do expect that he'll be the first quarterback off the board as of today, as we sit here on March
Mhm.
10th. It really feels like everything's trending in that direction, whether that be the Titans at 1, the Browns at 2, or the Giants at 3. I don't think his night is going to be long once we get to Green Bay, which he's probably be thankful for because it's probably going to be very, very cold outside, and he's going to be happy to get off the board early. But it does feel like all signs point to him being the first quarterback and being a top 3 pick at this point.
Matt, we really appreciate you appearing on talkSPORT again this season, and hopefully we can stay in touch. And everyone follow Matt at NFL Draft Scout. He does a fantastic job for ESPN. Obviously, if you're watching this page, subscribe, like, and I'll be back with Will Gavin soon doing more on talkSPORT and at talkSPORT.com. Thank you very much.